Welcome to the program. Obviously this week we'll be concentrating very much on Canterbury and the earthquake, which has shattered a lot of lives. Really, David, you weren't even here when it hit, so you had to get here.
Yeah, I think that's the worst thing about being an MP that travels a lot. These sort of disasters hit and the first thought is, hell, how the family. I was in Auckland. I had a function to do early the Saturday morning. The first thing I knew was phone calls coming through from home at 5:30 in the morning, and that's most abnormal, so I knew that something was wrong. Heather was telling me everybody was okay, but it was a significant earthquake. Still dark at that stage, so I don't think anybody had an idea as to the extent of the damage. I turned on, there were two TVs in the hotel room, so I turned one onto TV1, watched an opposition program called Rural Delivery, and on the other channel had CNN. And interestingly, CNN were the first to say there'd been an earthquake in Christchurch. And then it was just a matter of how was I going to get back home as quickly as possible. The airport at that stage was closed. Fulfilled my engagements, actually came down with the Prime Minister, who straight away said, I want to get to Christchurch. He organised the Air Force. We came down via Wellington, picked up Jerry Brownlee as local minister, and also John Carter as Minister of Civil Defence, came into Christchurch and immediately into the Art Gallery, which was then the Civil Defence Emergency Centre, and pretty quickly got up to date with the extent of the damage.
Which has been huge.
Absolutely huge. We spent Saturday looking around central Christchurch. We were actually in the centre of the city when one of those small old buildings caught fire. So that was interesting just to watch the reaction from the reporters around there, seeing the fire service come in, hoping as they hooked their hoses there was actually water. Thank God there was. They managed to get that building out, but it was enclosed by other buildings either side of it. If they hadn't had water, that building could have spread, a fire could have spread to the next one, etc., etc. It was just the intensity of the situation, the nerves of everybody relatively frayed, other shocks coming through. Sunday, managed to get out into the rural community and see how that was. Some severe damage out there for some people. The concern, of course, was animal welfare. Were the cows being milked? Were they getting access to stock water? And I've got to say, full credit to the farming community. They quickly got past that. They looked after their own families first, their own animals first. Next reaction is look over the fence to see how the neighbour was. Typical New Zealand rural emergency response.
So you've had a decent look around. How bad is it out there beyond the city limits? Well,
I think we've got past the urgent issues around welfare, etc. As I said, every cow is able to be milked. If they haven't been able to make the milking platform functional, they've got an arrangement whereby they can milk in a neighbouring shed not too far away. So we're past the immediate concerns. The big concern we all have now is to what extent is the damage unable to be seen at the moment, particularly in water infrastructure, irrigation infrastructure. All those main lines are buried at least a metre below the ground. There was at this stage no electricity. Now we've got the electricity back. It's a matter of slowly winding these pumps up and seeing whether the system works. And if there is substantial damage, that is a major for this area, because as you know, it's a summer dry area. They have dairying there that's intensive. We're going to have irrigation systems that are functional come the summer.
Obviously, the people in themselves, you don't know what's happening in their heads either.
Well, what we know, what I've observed myself, and I think I can say on all honesty, I'm experience myself, is a lack of sleep with these aftershocks. They just keep on coming through. You go to bed at night hoping for a restful sleep. A couple of nights ago we had that severe one about 10 to 1 in the morning. I doubt whether many people went back for a restful sleep. So they're coping with sleep deprivation, which is an issue. They're also stressed now about how they can get their lives back together. My own colleague, Amy Adams, MP for Selwyn, her house has effectively been destroyed. So various people are coping with different unique circumstances, but just the stress of the whole thing. If they haven't had their own houses destroyed, they're likely to know somebody who's perhaps lives in the city who's had major damage to their house. So we've all got a long way to go, but I think we're making remarkably good progress when you consider this is day 6 of the event.
Minister, everybody looks straight at the government and you'll be getting knocks on your door.
Yeah, at this stage, well, we've made a number of responses already. We immediately gave money to the Mayoral Welfare Relief Fund, $5 million. We then made a substantial announcement over the last couple of days around making sure there's a way that those businesses that effectively closed down and interrupted because of the quake can at least pay wages to their staff. So that's another, probably a $15 million exercise. In my own rural area, we've put together a rural support group, which involves every stakeholder we can think of: Federated Farmers, Beef and Lamb, Dairy NZ, Fonterra, the 2 rural support trusts, which are absolutely invaluable at times like this. So those sort of groups are now together. We've appointed a coordinator, Alan Baird, who's a very experienced operator in the sort of trauma relief area from Ashburton. And we need to take time now to actually measure the extent of the damage before government knows what its response should actually be.
I mean, how long do you think it will be before you can glean that knowledge?
Well, I think it's a matter now of testing. The one that worries me is this water infrastructure, the wells. Are the wells still functioning? Has the water aquifer actually moved away from where the well is? That's a possibility. Is the pump able to be used again, or has that been damaged? Has the well between the pump and the surface been fractured? And once we get up to the surface, then those underground mains lines, have they been fractured? Exactly. In some cases, I imagine they must have been, but the extent of that, we need to measure first to know where to from there.
I'll be talking to Tony Daveron later in the program, literally about that sort of thing, because he's very much involved, and the Aquamat boys who can do the radar to see what's under there.
And that, I think, is the high level of technical support and advice we now need. It's all very well for farmers or ministers of agriculture to surmise what the damage may be. We actually need an accurate assessment of it. The interesting thing will be, once we assess the amount of damage, how much of it is actually insured, and therefore covered by the insurance industry, how much of it is uninsured. And that's the challenge I think we as government face, both in rural Canterbury and in the city, the balance of treating those people who find themselves uninsured with an equity package that doesn't encourage anybody in the future not to continue to pay their own insurance.
It's a delicate line.
It's a very delicate line. You know, frankly, if you live in New Zealand, you should be wise enough to be purchasing insurance. Some people won't have, for various reasons. We need to make sure we've got a response that's equitable, because if we were over generous to those that have not insured, then in the future we encourage other New Zealanders to reconsider whether it's worthwhile insuring. It's a very delicate line.
Where do you put yourselves as far as the psychological damage? Because that's ongoing. It's like a drought, stress, isn't it? It creeps up.
Well, I think it's a matter of how quickly we respond and get over it. You know, if you live in Kaipoi, where I've been over the last couple of days, and you've got a relatively modern house that's now all sorts of shapes and sizes, effectively it's to be destroyed, your psychological impact is clearly significantly greater than somebody who's perhaps had lost a chimney at some other part of Kaipoi. So it's hard to know, and various people are responding better than others. But I think we need to keep an eye on that psychological stress on all Cantabrians for some period of time.
Obviously, it's going to come away from the news media. There will be something else that they will focus on. But for Canterbury, for the rural people, as well as the city, it's not going to go away.
No, it's not. But having been now in a central city most days since the event, having been in Kaipoi a number of times, to be honest, we're making good progress and starting to get things back to normal. I guess it's a matter of how you describe normal. I think there'll be some aspects that we won't recover from for a decade. But I think you'll see a functional town, a functional city operating far shorter time frame than many are picking as we come to grips with the situation and just get on with it.
One of the problems that has been hitting is access for trucks to roads and airports and such. That's a big priority for you to get those flowing?
Yeah, where we've got road damage, and in fact Stephen Joyce is here yesterday making some announcements around how government can help with that. In my own rural areas, I've noticed a lot of roads that are damaged, some that are impassable, but because of the good network of roading in Canterbury, in mid-Canterbury and North Canterbury, there's other ways to get around. So I don't know of anybody who's absolutely isolated because of road damage. Here in Christchurch City, we clearly need to try and open up the centre city as quickly as possible. There are people with businesses, the bars, the cafes, etc., who have put their life savings into owning and operating those businesses. I fear for those people. They want the city back as normal as quickly as possible so they can start to get their business up and running, so they can start to eke out a living.
You're going to be hanging around for a long time.
One of the very interesting things is the way Parliament's reacted. in a non-political way, and the first thing that was done was an agreement across all political parties that any member of Parliament from Canterbury can be down here in Canterbury, and the vote still counts for any votings that occurs in Parliament. So that was a good solution to a situation where no political party was trying to play politics. We all know this is a very serious event. My opinion, probably the biggest disaster to ever hit New Zealand, and we don't want politics getting in the way.
David Carter, Minister, thank you very much indeed.
Please, thank you.